Is Western media biased and even racist in the way Russia's invasion of Ukraine is covered? Has the public stopped trusting the media? Hello and welcome to Media and Society on SABC News, independent and impartial. My name is Rams Mabote. This is where we look at the intersection between media and audiences. This show is not complete without your say. Connect with us via our social media channels and share your views and concerns about how the media works and what we feed you. Hashtag SABC Media and Society and call us on 011-714-6841 or 6842. MultiChoice has removed Russia TV from all DSTV bouquets. The channel is also currently inaccessible in Europe. Google Play Store has removed the RT app from the platform. In America, RT offices have been shut. While this happens, many have raised concerns at what they allege is the racist tone that is targeted at non-Europeans and the countries they come from. To talk about the kind of treatment the story has been receiving in Western media is Stephen Gruzd, head of Russia-Africa project at the South African Institute for International Affairs. He's here with me in studio in Johannesburg. From Nairobi, we're hoping to be joined by Kennedy Wandera, who is chair of the Foreign Press Association. He's not with us now, but he's going to join us on Zoom at some point. Good morning, Stephen, and thank you very much for joining.
Good morning, Rams. It's so great to be in the studio after a long time.
It's good to have people in studio for us. I've been talking to screens for a long time. To speak to human beings is a wonderful thing. In your view, is the banning of Russia TV, again, speaking to this perception that there is a one-sided story that we're being fed?
So I think DSTV's hands were tied because its European distributor stopped the feed coming through to South Africa. So this isn't something that MultiChoice has decided on its own. Be that as it may, I think the ban on Russia TV, RT, has been part of the sanctions package and part of this expressing outrage at what's happening in Ukraine perpetrated by Russia. We've seen soccer matches cancelled. We've seen ice hockey cancelled. Russia's not allowed to sing in the Eurovision Song Contest. So it's part of that. But I think, yes, it has taken off air an alternative view of the conflict. Some say very biased, some say full of propaganda, but as the saying goes, in a war, the first casualty is truth. Yep. And it does give a different perspective. If you don't like that perspective, don't watch it. Now you don't have the option of watching it or not watching it. People in Europe have decided you're not watching it.
Because for me, from where I sit, it would seem like everybody is biased. So I would love to be fed all biases.
Absolutely. I don't think CNN or BBC claims to be neutral. They claim to be putting across the truth. RT claims to be putting across the Russian government's view. So maybe RT is even more transparent in a way because what you see is what you get and you know exactly which perspective. But other major news channels try and portray themselves as neutral, as unbiased, and of course they do have a bias. But that's not to say that everybody is right. I think that's important. The media coverage is one thing, but as your show talks about, it intersects with society and how we consume it, yeah, and what opinions it helps us form as human beings, as watchers, as audience.
I find it very ironic, by the way, that many South Africans were not even aware that we have Russia TV on that bouquet. And once it got removed, it became a big story. What does it say about us not being aware that there was that channel? Was it just a poor marketing thing, or we don't care about that part of the world?
It might be poor marketing. All of us sit with our remote and we flick through channels, and it looks, RT looks like any other news channel. But if one watches it for a while, you really get to see that this is strong word from Moscow. But I think it does say something about our audiences that they didn't even know it existed. And then, of course, I'm sure they've also come out and said this is an abrogation of free speech. They should have the right to be heard. But maybe our consumers are lazy and just default to the ones at the beginning of 400 rather than moving a little bit further down the DSTV remote.
I am told that Kennedy Wandera has finally joined us from Nairobi. He is chair of the Foreign Press Association. He's on Zoom. Kennedy, good morning.
Good morning, Rams. How are you?
I'm very well. Thank you very much for joining us, mate. You're not too late, don't worry. So you're going to just catch up on this conversation. But as a journalism body, what's your view on the removal of Russia TV all over the world, really, and even the app being completely removed now on Google?
Yeah, I think we are caught into the geopolitics of the world, and every country, especially the bloc, is trying to look at how much sanctions they can place on Russia for invading Ukraine. But we've always said, just as medical personnel will be given a corridor to access, to allow the medical have an access to the country to offer medical services, and also allow journalists to have a buffer zone where they can actually be able to report on what's happening in Ukraine. The same also, to me, plays a major role on journalists. Journalists need to also report, because if you don't report effectively, then people are lost in information. But we've seen a lot of justification for that, especially for what the Europe say Russia is trying to invade Ukraine without justification. So perhaps they have reasons to do that. But again, I'll speak majorly on the news media that have been cut from operating in Russia. I think this is trying to censure information and trying to curtail journalists from reporting what is happening. And for me, as an organization that I represent here, the Foreign Press Association Africa, we don't think it's right for Russia to cut access or to disallow journalists in Russia to operate the way they've been operating, because we've seen reports, BBC, VOA, and other international organizations being curtailed from reporting while in Russia.
But Kennedy, isn't that a package of war? That in war, you want only your voice to be heard. You want your propaganda to be the one that controls the views. Isn't that what we should expect anyway in a war situation?
Of course, we expect it in any war situation, but you've seen even this propaganda being drawn into media, and media being used as tools for propaganda. And I'm not going to mention names, but of course, you know, some of these organizations, news organizations, especially being involved in the fight in the war in Ukraine. Some of these organizations, you can clearly, they are being used, whether in their own volition or not, they are being used to spread propaganda. For instance, the organizations within the two countries where we are seeing the flow of information being curtailed, and they have to report what actually the government is saying. Yeah, the two governments are saying. So we journalists play our role. In war, there is always propaganda, but we must stand at a point where we can differentiate between propaganda and the real information that people know. Because every side in this particular conflict want to let people know that we are winning the war, yeah, as opposed to the other side. But again, now they use this. They use some of our colleagues to spread propaganda, which is not our role as a media. It's not our role as a media. So when you get a situation where now you see the media organizations at the heart of spreading propaganda, then you definitely know we've lost it.
Stephen, let me ask you the question I asked in my intro. Is the media biased, in particular in covering this war?
It's interesting to take a historical view. If you think about the British press, it has been backing its side for a long time, since the Napoleonic Wars. You look at World War I, you look at World War II, you look at the Vietnam War or the Falklands War in 1982. The press gets behind the government. It becomes jingoistic. It becomes patriotic. It thinks. And sometimes I think loses objectivity. But I think this war is very emotional. We are seeing terrible scenes. We are seeing huge suffering in Ukraine. And this is also, I think, coming into how media portrays. I think they are emotional as well. And that's not always good when you're in the media business. But also, when someone is reporting from a metro station, an underground train station with thousands of people in, if you're seeing these platforms with thousands of people trying to get on trains, you're seeing women and children in this freezing cold snow weather walking miles and miles to try and get over the border into Poland or Slovakia or Hungary. It also, the human story makes it real for people. But the media is, I think you have extremes. You have RT is definitely a biased station, and so is BBC, and so is CNN, and so is SABC. Impartial, we like to think, but these things cloud us. And I think the media is used in the war effort, as Kennedy said, either willingly or otherwise.
Kennedy, aren't we over-exaggerating this neutrality of the media? Media, you and I are human beings. We take a side. We belong somewhere. We've got a history. Why is it strange when journalists take a side?
It's strange because we are the custodian of information. The media is a reflection of what the society ought to do. And if media is biased, then we find ourselves in a position where we cannot critically play our role. Now, media plays a watchdog role, very, very critical role that we play here. And of course, personally, we have our biases, but we must never let our biases be conspicuously known to the parties or known to the public. So we have ethics. Media has its own ethics. And just like a profession, just like any other profession, we must abide by the standards that we've set ourselves for. And this means, even in times of elections, you will understand, you Rams, you vote, but it's not your duty to come on TV and tell people how you're going to vote.
True that.
It's not my duty to go. Yes, it's not my duty to come to tell people who I'm going to vote for. We exercise those roles, but we must play to the trade. We must play to the ethics that we are trained to apply with. For instance, if you are a journalist and you are taking sides in a conflict, so how do the public understand what you're trying to tell them? So we have biases, which is a natural thing, but we must never allow these biases to be in the open, that people can easily identify Kennedy as a biased person is reporting, but he supports a certain candidate, reports, but he's supporting a certain side in the conflict. That is not our role. We must play a role that is consistent with what the society expects us, because we are the people who send information in an unbiased way to the people. So we must let the people decide on their own.
Well, we call media and society, so we're not complete without society speaking to us. CH is calling. Good morning. I'm very well, thank you for asking. How are you?
I'm good, thank you. No, I thought that I should also make my little contribution with regards to the day. Well, I must say that it's very disappointing that the Europeans can decide what content for the Africans to listen to or Africans. I mean, how do we explain that MultiChoice has cut off the Russian TV? Because if you look at what is happening in Ukraine, the situation in Ukraine, you would be able to get a balanced view when you look at both the Western media and the Russian media. Because what the Russian media has also been portraying to us and has been trying to share its content for the past weeks before the invasion was to give a historical genesis of where this thing comes from of the war. It dates to as far as the early 2000s, whereby they've been trying to paint a picture that explains many attempts which were made by the Russian government to try and make NATO and the Western world aware that they are tampering with territories which may end up leading to confrontation. However, I must say that as a South African citizen, we are very disappointed, some of us, that multi-choice has to define the agenda for us as it is dictated to by the Western world. Maybe we need to have a discussion to say, how can we go about making African media to define its own agenda without external influences? Of course, understanding that we are living in a global community. But I must say, media does indeed have its own agenda, and media continues to be one of the spaces which continue to be used by some Western agendas on issues that we need to hear objective views on. I mean, even the SABC itself last week, we saw an interview.
Can you wrap up, please? Yes,
Okay, as I wrap up, even the SABC itself, we saw last week as the Communist Party was being interviewed, that it already defined its agenda. They were already alleging that Russia has invaded Ukraine and such. So there is a need for us to engage on what agenda does our African media, or South African media to be precise, is advancing. Thank you. Thank you,
Tsietsi from Mafike. Simo is calling us from Secunda. Good morning.
Good morning.
Yes, sir.
Yes, how are you?
Very well, thank you.
Thanks. We have a very deep feeling of realizing that we do not have an independence as the country regarding what multi-choice have just done. It's a bit immaterial for me to actually consider either we knew the station or we were familiar with or we were not. But it seems as if as the country we are taking sides, which seems to be biased, the one that you're speaking of, either the media should be biased or not, but they are taking sides. And this is an agenda of the capital system to actually fight against Russia, to sabotage whatever the Russians have decided to do towards Ukraine. Either it's material or it's not, but right now what is portrayed, it is as if Russia is wrong. We do not know anything that Russia has done which is good, because the agenda of the Western is to actually convince us as the people who follow or consider media as a point of reference for information. So right now we are being blinded, or we are being informed from a blind spot to say Russia has done that, Russia has done this, Russia has done that, as if Russia is wrong. We have not found the core of the conflict that is going on. Where does it emanate, and what were the resolutions that have been breached by Ukraine so that Russia is now taking a decision to fight Ukraine in this manner? All that we are being told is that there must be sanctions that are imposed over Russia. Russia is out of order. But Russian people have been in this world long enough not to actually break any laws just for the fun of it. Why are they doing that? That has never been said. Why is Russia actually fighting Ukraine? But we are being told that Russia is out of order. The G8 countries, the G20 countries, the African Union, or all other countries will unite against this unjust law, injustice of Russia. That's how we are being
Simo,
told by the media.
I have to cut you off, my brother. Thank you very much for the views. After the break, we're going to continue with this conversation, and we want you to join us. Do call and debrief on 714-6842. It's Media and Society on social media. Please comment on those pages too. Welcome back. You're still watching Media and Society. To help us unpack this, I still have Stephen Krust, head of Russia-Africa project at the South African Institute for International Affairs. And joining us from Nairobi in Kenya is Kennedy Wandera, who is chair of the Foreign Press Association. Continue to be part of the conversation, 011-714-6841 or 6842 on Twitter, hashtag SABC Media and Society. Kennedy, Isn't that the issue? The issue that we're complaining about Western media and Russian media, isn't the issue the gap that Africa is not having its own media, sending it into territories that are not reported adequately about or fairly about, that we get the views that we want to get out there?
It's never that way. It's never that way. Africa has had its own share of problems. How has the African media been reporting on it? That's the first question. The second question is, whenever we have such kind of things on the continent, we try to get influenced by the political class, who try to influence the narrative. So you truly find that even what is coming out of that particular conflict, it's not something significant that you can try to put a blame on the other party or the other party. So it is suppressed. So I don't think that we blame West media for much of these problems. Even we have a fair share of our problems here where we are seeing media being suppressed, people being restrained from doing their work because of one reason or the other, governments thinking that they are going to carry a certain narrative that's going to cast us in bad light. So, and one thing that I perhaps will want to comment on, especially coming from a comment that was made by one caller, we have pay TVs, like we have the MultChoice in South Africa and also giving much of services to the rest of the Africa and even outside there. But we must realize that there is the business angle that journalists cannot control when it comes to what you see on TV and what you don't see. And therefore, that cannot be a blame that is squarely placed on journalists or media for not doing this or that. Because even these organizations that are suspending their services to Russia or wherever, they are looking at the market value. They're looking at the rules that they are supposed to abide by. We are seeing even organizations like Twitter perhaps will want to pull out of Russia. World Cup, FIFA is pulling out of Russia or pulling Russia out of World Cup. Why are they doing that? Because perhaps they believe it's going to choke what they are doing. So there are things we in the media cannot squarely be placed blame on because we have no control. We have no control at all. We have control on what we report. We have control on what we can access and provide to the society.
Stephen, we've dealt a lot with bias. Let's move to the other elephant in the room, race and racism. There's been a lot of complaints about how the media have covered this, and there's been clips that we've seen people complaining about, these are people like us, there should not be a war here, this is not a third world country. Is this just another revelation of what has always been there? I mean, you work in that space, and Eastern Europe is not reputed for being the most harmonious in race relations.
Yeah, it's not always the most tolerant. Yeah. I think it's very unfortunate, and there does seem to be a hierarchy in whose suffering is covered. So when it is white people and families and women and children, the media loves that because it pulls on the heartstrings. But if there's a conflict in Somalia or Palestine, the DRC or the Middle East, less attention until it gets very hot. And then again, the media comes in. But I mean, I think we have heard these stories, and they're true, of African students and workers who were in Ukraine trying to get across the border. They were not treated equally. Some were beaten by border guards with Kalashnikovs. Some were turned away. Some were pushed out of the line. And there are thousands. That's been a revelation to me, how many thousands of Africans. But in a sea of 1.2 or 1.3 million people, it's maybe easy to pick out the black faces. It's very unfortunate. It's wrong, but this is just, I think, the way that the world works, that some conflicts get, we've had 24/7 wall-to-wall coverage of this conflict, whereas there's less on other still serious conflicts. Unless you're maybe an Al Jazeera or a SABC, there's not much in the news about the conflict in Ethiopia, for example. I think we have to try and change it, and we have to try and get these stories out. But yes, there is an element of race in this conflict for sure. But just to even it out, we've also had recent stories of racism from Russia itself on African students who were called monkeys and had bananas thrown at them. So, it's not either or, it's not black and white.
That is exactly why I said Eastern Europe, I didn't say Ukraine, because it has always been there that, horrific stories of racism in that part of the world.
And I think in a country like ours, we can't tolerate it. And I think that's why it's important to talk about it. But indeed, it is a big elephant in the room.
Kennedy, is there an expectation from the public for media to have less commentary on issues like this, to just report plainly and walk away from it? Is there room for commentary?
There is no room for commentary. There is no room for commentary. If you want opinion, you place them on newspapers. Let me say this. The Foreign Press Association sent out a statement, a very strong statement, because we had seen our colleagues appearing on TV and trying to use words like this is a civilized country, not like other countries like Afghanistan, Africa, or Iraq, where there has been conflicts like this. Now, we put outside there and said, let our colleagues stick to media. Let them stick to what they're supposed to do. Nobody, and I say nobody, is not at risk of being subjected to war anywhere in the world. Nobody. And therefore, trying to use platforms like that, forgetting that there are people in Ukraine who are suffering, young people are suffering, women are suffering, people crossing over to Poland are suffering. And then you take that platform, you want to let people know the long-held racist biases, making remarks that are going to create a wedge. We say, no, that is wrong. So we are saying that our colleagues need to stand and need to stick to what they're supposed to do. Yeah, we know how racism chokes the world, how people are pissed off with people who go to the extent of being racist. Yeah, so it cannot be our colleagues in the media. It cannot be. And you cannot use a situation where there's so much emotions flowing from Ukraine and then use that platform trying to depict other people as brown and black. No, we have to just stick to what we're supposed to do in the industry and remain professionals, report what the public want to see, what they want to hear, instead of turning around and being a journalist who've been reporting these particular events for about 3 or 4 decades. Then there's nothing you've learned out of it? No, we're saying it is improper, and journalists everywhere, they must just stick to what they're supposed to do. When we're not dictating to anybody, because we've seen this tendency, especially from the Western media, the way they report as if we have some second-class citizens on this in countries where these conflicts are taking place. Yeah, so our clarion call at the Foreign Press Association of Africa is that our colleagues must sympathize
Kennedy,
with the
I need to
people who are
stop you
caught in this
and
conflict.
take one more call. I'm running out of time very quickly. Vusi is calling from eThekwini. Good morning.
Good morning. Good morning.
Yes, sir.
My comment is short, very, very, very short. It is so interesting that from the media society point of view, as well as Foreign Press Association, there seems to be confirmation of the media being biased, irrespective of the fact that the media is the custodian of the information that is said. It's very good that is confirmed in national television. For example, it goes without saying that practicalities of every situation have indicated that media belongs to where it is owned. For an example, the ENCA every day we are told that it is independent and impartial. Basically, it is independent, but impartial, no. That is my only comment.
Thank you very much. Almost brief, Vusi. Thank you very much for that. Unfortunately, Stephen and Kennedy, I have run out of time. It's a very important conversation, but in fact, I'm told I must take another call. Temba, good morning.
Yes, good morning, Rams. I'm gonna be quick.
Okay.
I'm gonna be quick, Rams. First, appreciate your program for taking our calls without censoring us. But Rams, my point is always, these entities are business entities. There's a difference, to me, there's a difference between a journalist or journalists and the entity itself, like your CNN, if I can call them. The entities are behind money and they are making money. That's one. Two, there is no way that you can find them being impartial because they are protecting the status quo as it happens here at home. It's like their money, and if the world gets into war, they are going to lose money. So they must propagate that there is war, there's Russia bringing mayhem to the whole world so that everybody supports them. How can you find journalists in America where everybody gets trained as an army soldier at young age and they get thrown into the society as veterans at age 32? You are not going to find those journalists in any media company being partial. They are going to always push the stance of their government. But thank you very much, Rams. We are still waiting to hear that the world is being pulled into war by America. Russia is attacking a specific territory, but America and the likes are pulling all of the world into war.
Thank you very much for that call, Temba, and thank you for noticing that we don't censor you. We don't want to be doing that. As I was saying, gentlemen, time has run out. Stephen Cruz and Kennedy Wandera, wonderful chatting to the both of you. Thank you for your insights and have a great morning further. After the break, we chat about whether the public has lost trust in the media, probably related to this conversation. Call us on 011-714-6841 or 6842. Recently, while covering the destruction caused by floods in Tembisa and Ivory Park, SABC journalists Mahlaku Komani, Sbuso Tembe and Horisani Stole faced hostility and were eventually chased away by residents. There have been various incidents of journalists experiencing such in South Africa. Could this mean the public has lost trust in the media? Let's hear some of the views from the public itself.
I do trust the media because most media personalities or media houses do verify their stories before they share with the nation.
Citizens can get the latest information through media, and it helps people to build a relationship and staying connected.
I don't really believe in the broadcasting media because they have a tendency of just spreading misinformation, sometimes being biased.
Too often major media outlets will carry the story without validity, especially on corruption, political issues, even crime.
Media is very much pertinent and important in our day-to-day operation. You see, number one, it gives us the information that's accurate and functional. Number two, we learn about what's happening around the globe.
I don't really trust all the information that I receive from media because I feel like most of the information that we receive, especially information that involves the government, I feel like it's very suspicious because the information contradicts each other.
I do trust the media because it provides us with information that is accurate, and because of media we get to receive information about all the things that are happening all over the world.
Call us on 011-6841 or 6842 to share your views, or hashtag Media and Society. Have we lost your trust? Joining me is SABC reporter Horisani Stole and Jude Maturin, lecturer in the Media, Culture and Communication Department at the Nelson Mandela University in Gqeberha. Good morning, gentlemen, and thank you very much. Let me start with you, Horisani. What really happened in Tembisa?
Morning,
and I'm glad to see that you're alive.
No. We're used to these things every now and then. I mean, those who've been following these issues, I mean, I was once attacked in Tshwane some few years back when there were unrests and burning of buses and stuff. So it's stuff that we are used to. But all I can say, Rams, is that there are different things depending on where you are and what could influence that. There are too many issues that influence.
Give me two.
For example, in that case, in Tembisa, the recent one, it had to do with me being an SABC employee, which of misinformation about people will be like, okay, you guys are government, and then government is not doing anything for us. Someone was saying, you guys were here in 2019, but you reported and then there's nothing that happened. So you have to pay for government's failure to do service delivery.
Wow.
Based on you're working for a government parastatal. Sometimes it's certain people not understanding why are you there, and also issues of alcohol, because the guys were drunk, so it has to do with so many things.
In your view, had you and the team done anything to provoke this hostility?
Not at all. They just said, no, you guys, you work for the SABC and your government, and this government that's failing to deliver services for us. So now, why are you here? But at the same time, I should highlight this. It was a mixed emotion from different types of people. There were those who were happy to see us there and begged us not to leave. But unfortunately, when it's hostile, you remember some lost cameras. And when I was attacked last time, somebody beat my hand. So you just have to keep yourself safe first thing first.
Jude, first, I think I mutilated your surname, and you'll help me with that. But the Edelman Barometer says that there's a falling trust between us, the media, and public. Do we know why this is the case?
The reasons are varied and complex. In the particular context that your colleague was mentioning, there could be a range of reasons. You have to remember that in certain contexts where there is unrest, there's criminality that's occurring, and particularly if you've got cameras showing stuff, I think the last thing that some people who are engaged in criminality want to do is to have their faces shown on TV. So obviously they would want to chase the media away. But then there's also the additional factors that in many of our communities across South Africa, their issues are either not represented, or they feel their issues are misrepresented, and/or their concerns are only brought to the fore when there is unrest, when there is violence. In fact, some communities will deliberately say that they commit and create unrest situations in order to bring the media, in order to bring attention to their particular plight. So certainly that's one of the reasons. Other reasons for the decline of media trust, and Edelman research puts South African media trust fairly low at about 41%, which is in the distrust pile. But I should point out in relation to that research, which is online research, in other words, they only interviewed 1,150 South Africans online, which of course limits age and limits urbanality, the urban nature, and limits the language of people, English, for example, for those interviews. We rated above the USA, we rated above Japan, we rated above France, but our media trust rates are fairly low. And the Edelman research is one that's been continuing for the last 10 years. We make that in comparison with the Reuters digital news research report that came out last year, and they said that overall South African trust was 52%, so slightly higher, two different pieces of research coming on there. But as I indicated, the reasons are varied. Part of those reasons as well is that when we had media scarcity, when we only had one or two newspapers and we had the SABC, there were fairly unipolar messages that were disseminated, one distinct point of view that very often would circulate in society, of a hegemonic view. The consequence of digitization is this democratization of media production, where the tools of production is in everyone's pockets, and now the mediascape has exploded, as I think as you guys discussed last week, with citizen journalists and influencers and politicians who are now able to speak directly to their constituents and audiences, whereas in the past they had to go through the mainstream media. So there's issues related to trust because of how the media has represented communities in the past. There's also issues of politicians using fake news rhetoric, in particular, powerful people like Trump with his view of fake news. Whenever he mentions CNN, In the case of the Philippines, Duterte, when he mentions Rappler, there's some politicians in South Africa that have beefs with groups like ENCA and Daily Maverick. And by bringing these issues up, and because they have fairly large constituents and people who follow them as well, people who, as a result of their own personal beliefs, have this confirmation bias that they won't listen to anything else or anything contrary to what they do, they won't listen to. They therefore view that the media as a whole is corrupt and dangerous. Within the media itself, there's also been a range of contestations with media organizations throwing mud at other media organizations. That doesn't help. It is important that media organizations are transparent, and when they make mistakes, they correct them. But this concern, I think, around the weaponization of mistrust against the media, particularly by politicians. We saw it, for example, with the Guptas, with its Val Pottinger campaign and the white monopoly capital campaign.
Jude, please hold that. Please hold that view. Hold that view, Jude. I'm going to come back to that view. Let's hold on a bit. Witness is calling from Limpopo. Good morning.
Morning to you and your guest there. I want to talk to you as a former reporter, and to a certain extent, I want to agree with Horisani there. Generally, in communities, community members are hostile towards the media, forgetting that the media is playing a very vital role in terms of ensuring that their grievances or areas of concern are heard by people outside that particular locality. Secondly, you find that organizers of, just to give an example of such protests, do not want to be known. So as and when you go there as a media and try to cover those stories, you find that there are organizers behind your ordinary women and men who are blockading roads. So they don't want to be exposed. And in most instances, journalists are found are actually vulnerable because you get there before members of the public order police can even arrive. So you're just exposed, you're just on your way. And we must actually appreciate the great work that is being done by reporters, especially the SABC, in terms of ensuring that they paint the proper picture of what's happening on the ground. That will be my contribution.
Thank you, Witness. Horasan, when I was a young reporter on the ground, that early 90s, I could safely say, trust me, I'm a journalist. And people trusted me. Could it be that you are facing a different challenge in the sense that you're now reporting under a democratic government, whereas I reported under a government that was never trusted? So people trusted everything that the media would do because we were seen to be part of the opposition to government. It's slightly tougher for you because it's a democratic government. And when you report and nothing happens, they feel like you're on the side of the government.
Rams, you hit it on the nail there, on the head. What I've seen is also, as Jude is saying, sometimes you've got these political leaders who go. I've had colleagues from back in the days, ANN7, not being given an interview based on their association with the Guptas. And they'll be told, we cannot give it to you, even if they are free and fair and there's nothing that they're going to lie about. Yeah. So you've got so many things. Even one of the guys who chased us in Tembisa last time, it had to do with the red T-shirts. The guys just came in and walked in there and said, yeah, but you guys are from the SABC. You'll remember that the ENCA, there was a time that they were not giving interviews to ENCA. So it goes back to that. Also, but criminal elements are also another problem, because when I was beaten on my hand, they were grabbing my phone. It had nothing to do with me being a journalist, but it had to do with a robbery that they were trying to take. They were trying to take my phone. So every now and then, you've got that hostility that has to do with something else greater than you being a journalist. Like it had to have to do with looting. Obviously, if people are looting, they wouldn't want you to film them. Nobody will want to be on tape, because the police then tomorrow will go back and do a rewind of that. We've had issues where we've been reporting and people were arrested based on what they saw on TV the night before. So then the following day, if we have to go back to that community, now we are the enemies because we've exposed people. So it has to do with so many aspects of, there are different ways into these things.
Jude, I don't have much time, but I need to ask, this is related to the conversation I had earlier with my other guests. Is the issue of ethics also impacting public's trust on us?
Yes, I think that there needs to be a certain transparency in terms of our ethics, and in particular, when media organizations make mistakes, to regret the error and do so prominently and publicly. Obviously, in the print media, we have the press council and the press ombud, and these errors are known. There's one media organization independent that is not a member of the press council and does that independently. And then, of course, for our broadcasters, there's the BCCSA. But perhaps programs like yourselves can start bringing prominence to these issues to identify and correct these mistakes. Because the problem is that sometimes we have misinformation, sometimes we have disinformation, and sometimes media and journalists genuinely make mistakes under a lot of pressure. So there must be a way that the public can see that they can trust them. And one way they can see or can trust them is this whole notion of radical transparency, being clear about the decisions we took and why we took them, and in a bid to help the media become, the public to become media literate, and understand things like issues around media ethics. Also, for example, for the public to understand differences between a state broadcaster like you would have in Zimbabwe and a public medium like the SABC that you have in South Africa, that it has undergone a process of change in the last 28 years. But I think people's, in certain communities, relationships to media haven't really shifted in the last 28 years. And this is a massive challenge for the media, particularly as in this phase that we're going through, media sustainability is now trying to push itself into becoming a trust business. So the issue that you brought to the fore here is a much, much larger one that requires, I think, a lot more conversation.
It's a difficult question to ask you because you're my colleague here at SABC, but do you find that the public could be trusting more community media than they're starting to trust big organizations like us, the SABC?
I think in a question of trust, it's something that you build. For example, I spend too much time in informal settlements, and then you'll have people who trust you. If there's something, you'll be the first to know and all that. And when you get there, you protect it. I remember we're covering a protest at Dudula, and because we knew the organizers, while it was a hostile situation, you could still walk in, and if everybody knows you build that. Hence, you talk about community. The community is easy to have someone, a community journalist. They know the person lives within them. The problem comes when I live in Sentin, and then I wanna go to Soweto when it suits me that day. Then there I'll have a big problem because I don't have that relationship. I've seen in many cases where some of my colleagues that are not known will never be given interviews.
It is easy to interrupt. You're right here in studio and you are my colleague, so it's easy to say, I have to run. Yeah. So Horasan Istolo, thank you very much. And Jude, Motorin lecturer at Media, Culture and Communication at Nelson Mandela University, thank you very much for your insights too. So we're going to conclude this conversation with tweets. You've been tweeting. We want to hear what you've been saying. We took a lot of calls, so it's time to now hear what you said online. Terry February says, I have lost all trust in media. You don't have to scratch the surface to identify the biases, lies, and unethical journalism. The reasons are blatantly obvious. And my name is Vuyo, says, trust is lost because media is taking sides instead of reporting fairly. Umzuguluga 7 says, SA journalists take tweets and write news. They are now a PR team for Cyril. They compromise themselves in the process. They don't want to be criticized. They block people who disagree with them. They want their opinions to be accepted as the gospel truth. And the very last one comes from Spelele Ivan Mbongwa, says South African media dismally fails journalism 101, which is what, who, where, why, whom, when, and how. I think you just added a few more that I didn't know, but thank you. The fact that RT was cancelled levels way too much to be, or leaves way too much to be desired. Those are our tweets. So thank you very much for watching and participating on Media and Society on SABC News Channel, independent and impartial. From me, Rems Mabote, goodbye and God bless.